Welcome to the channel The Human Code, where human behaviors are explained. Most people try to change their lives by changing what they do. They make lists, they set goals, they promise themselves they'll wake up earlier, work harder, focus more, and become more disciplined. For a few days, sometimes a few weeks, it works. But eventually, something strange happens. Motivation fades, consistency breaks. Old habits quietly return, and people often blame themselves. They say they lack discipline. They say they're lazy. They say they just don't have the willpower others seem to have. But the real reason change fails most of the time has nothing to do with motivation. It has everything to do with identity, because behavior is not controlled by motivation. It is controlled by who you believe you are. Most people try to change behavior without changing identity. They say things like, I want to start working out. I want to stop procrastinating. I want to be more productive. But inside their mind, the identity hasn't changed. They still see themselves as someone who avoids effort, someone who lacks discipline, someone who always struggles with consistency. And when behavior conflicts with identity, identity always wins. You can force behavior for a short period of time, but long-term, you will always drift back toward the person you believe yourself to be. Think about it this way. If someone believes they are not a disciplined person, every disciplined action feels unnatural. Waking up early feels like punishment. Working consistently feels exhausting. Following routines feels restrictive, because each action conflicts with their identity. But if someone believes they are a disciplined person, the same actions feel normal. They don't debate whether to work. They don't negotiate with themselves every morning. They simply act in alignment with who they believe they are. This is why identity is the most powerful force behind behavior. Your brain constantly tries to stay consistent with your self-concept. If you believe you are confident, your behavior will slowly reinforce confidence. If you believe you are unlucky, your behavior will unconsciously reinforce that belief. If you believe you are capable, your actions begin aligning with that identity. Identity acts like a filter. It determines what feels natural, what feels uncomfortable, and what feels impossible. And the dangerous part is that most identities are not consciously chosen. They are inherited. They form slowly through childhood experiences, social environments, past failures, and repeated narratives you've told yourself for years. Maybe you once struggled academically and started telling yourself you're not intelligent. Maybe you failed in business and decided you're not entrepreneurial. Maybe you had negative experiences socially and concluded you're not charismatic. These conclusions become identities. And once an identity forms, your brain starts protecting it. This is where people unknowingly trap themselves, because protecting identity often means resisting change. If someone believes they are bad with money, they may unconsciously avoid learning financial skills. If someone believes they are not athletic, they may avoid physical challenges. If someone believes they are always unlucky, they may stop pursuing opportunities entirely. The identity quietly shapes behavior, and behavior reinforces identity. This creates a loop. Identity creates actions. Actions reinforce identity. Identity grows stronger. The longer this loop runs, the more permanent it feels. But identity is not fixed. It is constructed, and anything constructed can be reconstructed. The key to changing identity is not dramatic transformation. It is small evidence. Your brain updates identity based on proof. Every action you take becomes a vote for the type of person you believe yourself to be. One action doesn't change identity, but repeated evidence does. If someone who believes they are disorganized starts organizing their workspace daily, they begin collecting evidence. If someone who believes they lack discipline begins finishing small tasks consistently, they gather proof. If someone who believes they are socially awkward begins initiating small conversations, the brain slowly updates the identity. Identity shifts do not happen through declarations. They happen through accumulated evidence. Many people make the mistake of trying to change everything at once. They attempt radical transformation. They create extreme schedules, strict routines, and unrealistic expectations. And when those expectations collapse, their identity becomes even more negative. They say, "See, I knew I couldn't do it." This strengthens the old identity. Real identity shifts are quiet. They happen through consistent small behaviors repeated over time. Each small action is a signal to the brain, a message that says, "This is who we are now." For example, someone who wants to become disciplined does not start by forcing extreme discipline. They start by proving reliability in small ways, keeping small promises to themselves, finishing small tasks, showing up consistently. These actions may seem insignificant, but psychologically they are extremely powerful, because every completed action weakens the old identity and strengthens the new one. Another powerful mechanism in identity change is language. The way you describe yourself shapes your behavior. If you constantly say, "I'm terrible at this," your brain accepts it as fact. If you repeatedly say, "I'm trying to get better," your brain interprets that differently. Language programs identity. This is why high performers are careful with self-description. They do not label themselves with limitations. They describe themselves in terms of direction, not failure. Instead of saying, "I'm bad at discipline," they say, "I'm building discipline." Instead of saying, "I can't focus," they say, "I'm improving my focus." This subtle shift changes how the brain processes identity. It transforms limitations into development. Another important factor in identity shifts is environment. Your surroundings constantly reinforce identity. If you spend time around people who reinforce your old patterns, your identity struggles to change. If your environment constantly triggers the same behaviors, identity becomes difficult to shift. Environment silently trains behavior. This is why people often experience dramatic change when they enter new environments, a new city, a new job, a new social group. These changes temporarily weaken old identity cues, but the most powerful identity shifts come from internal evidence rather than environmental change, because internal evidence follows you everywhere. Every time you act in alignment with the identity you want to build, you strengthen it, even if the action feels small. Identity is not about who you want to be someday. It is about who your actions prove you are today. If your actions repeatedly show reliability, your brain accepts reliability. If your actions repeatedly show courage, your brain accepts courage. Identity becomes the natural outcome of repeated behavior. Over time, something interesting happens. Actions that once required effort become automatic. Habits form. Discipline feels normal. Consistency feels natural. This is the moment identity has shifted. Not because you forced yourself to behave differently, but because your brain now sees that behavior as part of who you are. And when identity changes, behavior becomes effortless. You no longer debate whether to act, you simply act. This is why identity-based change is more powerful than motivation-based change. Motivation fluctuates, identity stabilizes. Motivation depends on emotion, identity depends on evidence. Motivation fades when life becomes difficult. Identity persists through difficulty. This is why people with strong identities rarely struggle with consistency. Their behavior aligns with who they believe themselves to be. The real transformation in life does not come from chasing goals. It comes from becoming someone who naturally moves toward those goals. Because when identity changes, goals become consequences rather than struggles. Success stops feeling like something you chase. It becomes something you embody. So if you want to change your life, stop focusing only on what you want to achieve. Focus on who you are becoming. Ask yourself, What identity would make this behavior natural? What kind of person does this consistently? Then begin gathering evidence. Small actions, small promises kept, small patterns repeated. Each one becomes a vote. Each one strengthens the new identity. And over time, the shift becomes undeniable. The person you once struggled to be becomes the person you naturally are. And that identity shift changes everything. Thanks for watching. If this helped, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.